What is up, Pit Boss Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Platinum Grilling. I am your host, Chef Shaun O'Neale. As you could have guessed, today is Tomahawk Tuesday. So we've got a massive Tomahawk Ribeye. We're gonna serve that up with a roasted pepper relish and one of my favorite sides, Balsamic Brussels Sprouts. That's all coming up right now on Platinum Grilling. All right, we all know it, we all love it. It is Tomahawk Tuesday in Pit Boss Nation, a chance for us to cook a huge piece of meat and share it all over social media for the world to see. So let's get started in this recipe. First thing we're gonna do is roast off our peppers for our roasted pepper relish. So we're gonna use 2 bell peppers and 2 poblano peppers. We've got the grill side with the heat shield open, heated to 400 degrees. And we're just gonna place these peppers right over the heat. Dry. We don't want to put any olive oil on these guys because we want that skin to char. What we're going to do is we're going to char the skin, then we're going to wrap it up in some cellophane and some plastic wrap, and we're going to let it steam. That will let the skins release completely from the peppers, and you'll have beautiful roasted red peppers and roasted poblano peppers. All right, so while our peppers are charring off, let's talk about the steak a little bit. So I've already done a couple things. First off, I salted this bad boy first thing this morning. As soon as I woke up, I put it on a tray and heavily salted it. I want that salt to get into the meat, right? So you want to give it at least 6 to 8 hours with the salt on top of it for it to really penetrate the meat so you actually flavor the meat all the way through. Second, I took this out of the fridge about 20 minutes ago. I knew I wasn't gonna be starting it immediately throughout this process. Since this piece of meat is so big, you really wanna let this come to room temperature for about 45 minutes or an hour. I'm out here in the Vegas heat, I'm gonna have some help with that. So now we're gonna season it up. I wanna season it about halfway through that room temperature process. So it's already been salted, it's already got that salt penetrating through. We're gonna use the sweet mesquite jalapeno. It's a smoke infused rub from Pit Boss. I really like this one with steaks. It really kind of adds a level of smokiness. And because of the jalapeno with the pepper relish, it all kind of goes hand in hand, right? So we'll season this pretty liberally. All sides, even this fat cap right here. You want to make sure you get every single nook and cranny of this steak well seasoned. You know, probably do it inside where the wind's not blowing your seasoning all the way around, but we make do. All right, so we're gonna let that sit. We've got about another 20 minutes. We're gonna finish roasting off our peppers. Once those are done, I'm gonna turn the grill down to 225 degrees, and I'm gonna smoke this until it has an internal temperature of about 120, then we're gonna sear it off. So let's finish roasting these peppers. All right guys, so our peppers are very nicely charred all the way around. That's gonna make the skin very easy to get off. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna take these inside, I'm gonna wrap them up in plastic wrap. I'm gonna turn my grill down to 225 degrees. I'm gonna let it cool down, and we're gonna start cooking this steak. All right, so my grill has cooled down. It's sitting at about 225 degrees now. We're not really 100% trying to cook the steak all the way through. We're trying to get a nice smoky flavor built up on it. And then we're gonna sear the steak to finish it off, get it to that nice medium rare. I'm actually gonna sear on the griddle side. I love the way cast iron gives the steak that beautiful, perfectly consistent sear all the way across. It keeps it away from that direct heat and really lets the smoke just encapsulate this steak and it just soaks up flavor, just sucks up all that smoke that's around it. So let's get this thing on the grill. All right, so our peppers have had a chance to cool down. I just want to show you again how easy it is to get the skin off once they've been nicely roasted. So we're just going to scrape this skin off of this red bell pepper here. You want to try to get the majority off. If a little bit is left like that, that's fine. If you're having some problems with the ends, just get rid of the ends, that's no big deal. I've got quite a bit in my bowl, so I'm just gonna cut that guy right in half there and only use that little bit right there. So from here you wanna make sure you get out all the seeds, of course. Get any remaining pieces of the black skin off. So then we're just gonna do a little bit of a dice on this. So we'll just come in here like this, give it a turn, come in the other way. And if you feel like you want a little bit finer dice, you can come back through, do a little a little bit of a dice action on there. And then we'll just transfer this to our bowl. And then I've already cooked off one of the components for our relish here. So what I did is I roasted off some garlic. This is super easy to do. Several ways you can do it. If you only need a few cloves, just separate the garlic cloves from the head of garlic. Put them in some tin foil with a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper. And then when they're done, there's this beautiful garlicky goodness that comes popping out of them. If you do a whole clove, this will save in the fridge, so you could definitely have done a whole clove and use them for tomorrow's spaghetti sauce. Or we're just going to squeeze all this garlic out and make a little bit of a puree, which it's already kind of so soft that it's pureeing when I squeeze it out. You're going to cook the garlic wrapped up in tin foil for about an hour. A little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper. You'll know when it's done. It's going to brighten up your whole house with the smell of garlic. So we're going to transfer this into our relish as well. Now we're going to add some chopped Italian parsley, a little bit of cilantro, about 2 tablespoons of each. And then I like to add a little bit of either red Fresno or a red long chili, just to bring in a little bit more heat, not too much. These aren't really that spicy. Okay, then we'll give it a little bit of pepper, just fresh ground black pepper. Obviously some salt, a good sprinkle of salt, probably about a tablespoon of salt. And then a little bit of olive oil. That's really just to bring it all together. I mean, this is just a vegetable pepper delicious relish. So we'll give this a nice mix, make sure everything is nice and cohesive, mixed together. We'll put this in the fridge. We'll let this kind of meld all its flavors together. So you want to let this sit for at least an hour. Right now we're only sitting at 66 degrees on our ribeye, so it will probably be at around 120 in about an hour. So we want to let this sit in the fridge, wrap it up nice and tight. Let it sit for an hour before you serve it. All right, so while our steak is smoking, we're gonna go ahead and get started on our Brussels sprouts. I cannot tell you how many people I have converted from loathers of Brussels sprouts to lovers of Brussels sprouts, and it's all about the way you cook them. Brussels sprouts really need to be burnt a little bit. Everything we eat has a proper amount of burnt, whether it's the crispy edges of a steak or that little crispy part of the edges of a lasagna. So we're gonna cook these on the flat top. We're gonna cook them over here. I've got a cast iron skillet going. I've already started rendering down some of the pancetta. We're gonna use pancetta to start off with. So we're cooking it on the griddle side. I know you're wondering why I have a cast iron skillet set up to cook. And that's really just to keep the griddle clean, because I'm gonna sear my steak on the griddle as well. So it's just to keep it clean. You could definitely do this dish 100% on your griddle, but we're gonna do it in a cast iron skillet today. So we're just gonna add our pancetta. And we want to keep this over about medium heat, which does mean you have to have it cranked up pretty high. So you want to keep an eye on it, make sure it's not getting too hot. Once you've rendered all the fat out of the pancetta, you'll remove it with a slotted spoon and leave as much of that fat in there as you possibly can. And then we'll add the pancetta back later on in the cooking process. All right, so while our pancetta is rendering, I'm gonna show you this cool little trick with these pearl onions that we're gonna use. I've already blanched these for about 4 minutes and then put them in an ice bath. To get them out of the skins, you just cut off the tops and just squeeze them right out. So super easy to do. No longer do you need to buy the frozen pearl onions. And when you do that, if you want to get chefy with a dish, they have those nice tails that you can pop right out, and they look really good on a plate. All right, so our pancetta has rendered some of its fat. We're gonna go ahead and remove it. We'll put it back in the same bowl because it's gonna go back into the heat when we start cooking the Brussels sprouts. So let's remove our pancetta with a slotted spoon. All right, we'll season these guys with salt and a little bit of pepper. And we'll turn over any that maybe we can see that the flat side, the cut side, is not facing down in contact with the cast iron. So we'll turn over any obvious ones, but not a big deal. And then from this point, let them sit, let them burn a little bit, right? So let those things cook. Gonna go for about 5-10 minutes, somewhere in there, depending on the size. Let them burn. Once they're burned, give them a little shake, and we'll finish up the recipe. All right, so my steak right now is at 97 degrees. I'm gonna flip it over, keep it on the same top rack. I just wanna do that so it's consistent cooking throughout the process. So each side has about the same amount of time cooking through the meat. So we're gonna flip that over and then we'll be back. All right, so we've got a nice little char going on our Brussels sprouts. So we're just gonna grab one of our Pit Boss gloves here. and just give these guys a little shake. See, we got some nice charred spots in there. All right, so those are almost done. They've got about 4 or 5 more minutes. I'm gonna put the top down so we get a little bit of more heat building up in there. About 4 or 5 more minutes, then we're gonna add some honey and some balsamic. Put our pancetta back in there. This side dish is absolutely a showstopper. Now we're gonna add our pancetta back. About 2 tablespoons of honey. And then a couple good splashes, maybe about a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar. Give that a nice stir. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna let that balsamic reduce. It's gonna become kind of syrupy and kind of create a sauce around the Brussels sprouts. So 2 to 3 minutes, once you see it starting to thicken up, then you can go ahead and pull it off the heat and keep it warm until it's time to eat. All right, Brussels sprouts are done. We'll just let them sit aside. If we need to keep them warm, once we transfer the steak onto the griddle, we'll put the Brussels sprouts on the grill side and turn the heat off, and that will just keep a little residual heat to keep them nice and warm. So we're gonna close the lid on this. We're gonna let this thing get super hot. Our steak is at 114 degrees, so we're 6 degrees away from transferring it to the skillet, searing it off, and then we're gonna cut into this bad boy. Beautiful medium rare coming up. All right, our steak is at 120 degrees. That's what we're looking for. We're gonna transfer it over to the flat top. I'm gonna pull it off, take the probe out. Transfer this guy over here. I'm gonna hit it with a little bit more seasoning, just so that way when it starts to sear, that seasoning actually sears into the meat. So again, we're using the smoke-infused sweet mesquite jalapeno from Pit Boss. And we'll just give it a nice good coat in here. Forget about the fat, it's kind of hot, but do it quick. All right. So, we want our griddle ripping hot. Like you see smoke coming off of it. We want this thing roaring hot. That's what's gonna give us that super crispy, hard sear on the outside of this ribeye. So we're gonna put down a little bit of oil. We got vegetable oil in there today. We'll move around this oil a little bit just to kind of coat the griddle. And I will say, when you put the steak down, do stand back a little bit, because this thing is ripping hot. And straight onto the griddle. All right, so the reason we cooked it to 120 is that gives us some variable, right? We're gonna try to cook it to pretty much 128 degrees internal temperature. After resting, that should bring us to 132, which should be a beautiful medium rare. So we're gonna sear it on both sides for probably about 4 to 5 minutes. This is a big hunk of meat. So sear it on both sides for about 4 to 5 minutes. Then it's the crucial part, it's resting. Rest your meat. This thing is huge, so we're gonna rest it for about 15 minutes as soon as it's seared. All right, so one thing that's super important is to render out the fat in the fat cap. So put on a heat glove if you have one, and just go around and cook all that fat down, render all that fat out on the edges of the ribeye. All right, so our ribeye is done. That feels like a beautiful medium rare to me. I cannot wait to try it with the Pit Boss sweet mesquite jalapeno rub. It smells delicious. We're gonna serve this up 15 minutes. Do not touch this steak for 15 minutes. Let it rest, let the juices come back in. Heck, this one may even need to rest for about 20 to 25 minutes because it is a dinosaur bone. All right, let it rest. The hardest part is done, the resting. I mean, look at that beautiful crust we've got from searing it on the griddle side of the Pit Boss KC combo. You really get that even crust. So we've rested it for about 15 minutes. Brussels sprouts are done. Our relish is done. Let's cut into this bad boy. This is what we've been waiting for, right? This is what we worked so hard for. So we're gonna cut right along the bone here to get that off of the bone, and then we can slice this bad boy. And down here is mostly fat, but we're still gonna add it to the plate. You'll notice since we rested it for 15 minutes, we don't have any juices running out. There's nothing going crazy. If you would have cut right into this, I mean, that juice is just gonna kind of flood out. All right, so now's the tricky part, trying to get this whole thing on the knife. Transfer to our board here. So you can see we've got a pretty nice medium there. I know, I went a little bit over, but you know, that's what happens sometimes. So we're gonna put our Brussels sprouts down right here on the back side of this steak. And then we will top it with our beautiful roasted pepper relish. Go right down the center here with this stuff. It is absolutely delicious, so you can't put too much on. All right, there we go, guys. It has been Tomahawk Tuesday. We've cooked up a delicious, gigantic tomahawk with a roasted pepper relish. That's it for this episode of Platinum Grilling with Chef Shaun O'Neale. This recipe will be available on pitbossgrills.com. Make sure you follow Pit Boss Grills and me at Chef Shaun O'Neale on all social platforms. And we will see you next time on Platinum Grilling.